Let's go to this now. Life Esidimeni whistleblower Professor Lesley Robertson has testified that she signed off on at least 3 ill-equipped NGOs to take in some mental health Life Esidimeni patients. She has been testifying at the Life Esidimeni inquest at the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. Now, Professor Robertson, a community psychiatrist, says she regrets signing the documents and felt her superiors deceived her. She was one of the whistleblowers who exposed the Life Esidimeni deaths in the media. Now, 144 mental health patients died in 2016 after they were moved from the Life Esidimeni facilities to various NGOs, some of which were unlicensed. And Nozintombi Miya has been tracking the story for us and joins us live in studio now. Now, Nozintombi, thank you so much for your time. Let's take a step back. This week we saw 2 other critical witnesses in the form of the former Finance MEC, Barbara Creasy. She also doesn't seem to be agreeing with much of what the former health MEC had to say.
Completely, absolutely, Bongi. And you know, what Barbara Creasy did in her testimony, which was quite interesting, is that she drew a clear line in terms of the fiduciary duties between herself as the finance MEC, as well as the duties by Gcadani Mahlangu, who was then health MEC. And she said that there was never a point at the Premier's Budget Committee, which is a central theme throughout the testimonies that come out, because it has been pinned as the central point at which big decisions were made, right? And she's saying there was never a point at the Premier's Budget Committee where they, as the executives, took a decision on behalf of the Department of Health to say they must cancel their contract with Life Esidimeni. She says what happened instead was that Gcadani and her high-ranking officials came to the PBC and made a proposal that they would cancel the number of beds by about 20% from Life Esidimeni and move that 20% of Life Esidimeni patients from the private facility, which is the Life Esidimeni private facility, to government facilities where they would save 50 million rand. And she says that as the executive at the Premier's Budget Committee, they would have never, ever been able to say to them that you need to cancel this contract because it was just simply not their responsibility. The senior financial accountant in the Department of Health would have been the one that would be able to deal with those contract issues and cancel or reinstate the contract. And she rubbished basically the claims that were made by Gcadani Mahlangu, where she's asserted that it was at the Premier's Budget Committee where they received the instruction to cancel the Life Esidimeni contract.
And it's quite interesting, and especially when you listen to quite a lot of what she had to say, even about the minutes, whether or not they're a true reflection. But then follows former Gauteng Premier, in fact, David Makura, who then says, I told Mahlangu that if she doesn't resign, I was going to fire her. What was going on there?
So this was just before the health ombuds made their findings about what had happened with the Life Esidimeni. So just to give you context, so in 2016, then Minister of Health Aaron Motsoaledi contacted the health ombuds and said, listen, I want you to investigate what had happened at Life Esidimeni. This was done. The following year, in February 2017, this was when the health ombuds was supposed to make an announcement on the findings, right? The day before, both the Premier, then Premier David Makura, as well as Gcadani Mahlangu were given an advance copy of the findings. And those findings were damning. It detailed the number of patients that had died. At that time, it detailed in excess of 70 patients that had died because the NGOs were ill-equipped, it was not rational, or, you know, the plethora of the different issues that we now know were irrational decisions that were taken that led to the contract being cancelled and the mental health patients being removed to NGOs. And he said that the day before the announcement of that finding, of the health ombudsman's finding, he'd called Gcadani to his office and he'd said to her, you will either resign or I will fire you. And she said in her testimony, first in the initial inquest that was chaired by former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke, as well as in May now, earlier this month when she did her testimony, she said she resigned of her own volition. But what David Makhura is now saying is he called her in the day before and told her she must resign or else he'll fire her because the findings were so damning. And she's, has been her testimony all along, that everything that she said has not been corroborated by either the papers that were in there or the information that's before the inquest, and she's blamed either the faulty recording or incorrect recording, or she's come up with a version that has been completely shattered by the facts that were brought before the court. We know that David Makhura had the conversation with her in the office, and he shattered her version that she, of her own volition, resigned.
And it's also quite interesting because you also think about some of what she, said as well when it comes to, things like the contracts itself. How did it come about? You listen to what she also says when she was approached with this particular position, how she didn't want it. So there's quite a lot there that, when you listen to this testimony, it doesn't also add up. But something else that doesn't add up for me today was listening to the whistleblower and how Professor Robertson is now saying she felt cheated and deceived.
Yeah. It was so interesting. Professor Lesley Robertson, she was one of the whistleblowers, and we do know from the families that dealt with Professor Robertson, they felt that she had fought for them. But it still doesn't quite explain her complicitness in the initial stages. So she explains that in early 2015, she'd had a conversation with the HOD. At the time, it had been Barney Silabalo, as well as her head. And they'd gone to one of the NGOs, they'd sort of done a walkabout, and they'd given her a piece of paper and said to her, please, can you sign? And this is just a checklist to say that you're happy, you're satisfied with the NGOs that the Life Esidimeni patients would be taken to. She signed it. She had no aversion to signing it at that moment. She said later that month, they had another meeting where she started to realize that the information that she was given was not the right information. It was at that point where she felt conned, she felt deceived, and she felt that she could not have gone and addressed the issue with her superiors because she just started in that position. And she was afraid, and she felt that she would be seen as being aggressive. In as much as she became a whistleblower and she recognized the error of her ways and the error of the ways of management, it still does not absolve her from the fact that in the first place, when they were still discussing how they were going to do the logistics of moving the Life Esidimeni patients, she was complicit.
Nozintombi, a lot of the stuff that's coming out of this inquest is mind-boggling, and I know you'll continue to watch it for us, and we'll monitor it through your eyes. But it's stuff that really just takes one into, questions to ask how shambolic can really decisions be that lead to the death of 144 people. But she continues to watch that inquest for us. That's our own Nozintombi Miya.